When my daughter opened my fridge and screamed, it wasn't because of what was inside, it was because she finally understood what she had done to me. I was sitting at the small kitchen table when it happened, my hands wrapped around a mug of tea that had long gone cold. The kettle had clicked off minutes earlier, but I hadn't noticed. I was listening to the old clock on the wall, the one that ticked louder when the house was too quiet. Tick, tick, tick. It had been my husband's clock. He liked knowing time was passing, even when nothing else was happening. My daughter's scream cut through that ticking like a blade. It wasn't a scream of fear at first. It was sharp, startled, almost offended. The kind of sound someone makes when reality slaps them without warning. I didn't jump. I didn't rush to her. I just closed my eyes for a moment and let out a breath I'd been holding for years. Because I knew exactly what she had seen. The fridge door stayed open. Cold air drifted across the kitchen floor, brushing my ankles. I could hear her breathing change, fast at first, then uneven. Plastic containers rattled softly as her hand shook against the shelf. "Mom?" she said finally. Her voice was thin, younger than her 38 years. What is this?" I opened my eyes and looked at her, really looked. The same brown eyes she'd had as a child, wide now, searching my face for reassurance I no longer had the strength to give. Her hair was tied back carelessly, a style she'd adopted after becoming a mother herself, practical, rushed, always ready to move on to the next thing. "That," I said gently, "is what happens when someone takes everything and leaves nothing behind." She swallowed hard. "Mom, why is there only—" "Close the door, sweetheart," I interrupted, my voice calm, almost tired. "You're letting the cold out." She didn't move right away. Then slowly, as if afraid of what might still be inside, she pushed the fridge door shut. The hum returned, steady, indifferent. Life going on. She turned to me with tears already forming. "Mom, I didn't know." I nodded once. "You didn't want to." That was the moment everything began to surface. But to understand how we got there, to that fridge, that scream, that silence, you need to know what my life looked like before my pension disappeared, before my daughter booked that trip, before I learned what it feels like to be betrayed by the person you raised with your own hands. Before all this, my life was small, not sad, just small. I lived alone in the house my husband and I bought 42 years ago, a narrow brick place with creaky stairs and a backyard that never quite grew grass properly. After he passed, the rooms felt bigger, emptier, as if they'd stretched to remind me of what I'd lost. I learned to live in half the space. I slept on my side of the bed. I cooked one portion instead of two. I folded laundry that smelled only of me. My pension wasn't much, but it was steady, enough to keep the lights on, food in the fridge, and my medications lined up neatly in their little plastic organizer. Enough for dignity. That mattered to me. Every month when the deposit came in, I wrote it down in a small notebook, blue cover. My handwriting had grown shakier over the years, but I still liked seeing the numbers written out, proof I was still managing on my own. My daughter, Lila, worried about me, or at least she said she did. She started coming by more often after her divorce. At first it felt nice, comforting even. She'd bring the kids sometimes, my grandbabies, their laughter filling the house again. They'd leave crumbs on the couch, fingerprints on the windows. Signs of life. "You shouldn't be alone so much, Mom," she'd say, glancing around the living room as if checking for danger. "What if something happens?" I'd smile and wave her off. "I've been alone longer than you've been married, sweetheart." She'd laugh, but there was always something tight behind it. Lila was tired. I could see that. Divorces take more than marriages do. They leave you hollowed out. She talked a lot about needing a break, about how the kids were overwhelming, about how she hadn't done anything for herself in years. "I just want to feel like me again," she said one afternoon, stirring sugar into her coffee again and again until it dissolved into nothing. I understood that feeling. God help me, I did. So when she asked if I could help her financially, just for a little while, I didn't hesitate. "It's not much," she said quickly, eyes downcast, "just until I get back on my feet." I told her we'd figure it out, because that's what mothers do. We figure things out, even when it costs us more than we can afford. At first, it was small amounts, groceries, school supplies, a utility bill she was behind on. I transferred the money myself, proud that I could still help. Then one day, she suggested something different. "It would just be easier if I handled your finances," she said casually, like it was nothing. "Just to keep things organized, make sure everything's paid." I remember the way my chest tightened just a little, a quiet warning, but I ignored it. "She's my daughter," I told myself. "She loves me." So I said yes. I didn't see it then, but that was the moment my life began to shrink even smaller, quietly, steadily, until all that was left could fit inside an empty refrigerator. Once Layla had access to my accounts, things changed in ways so small I almost missed them. At first, it felt like a relief. She set up automatic payments for my utilities. She insisted on buying my groceries when she visited. "Don't worry about it, Mom," she'd say, waving me off when I reached for my purse. "You've done enough." I wanted to believe her. I really did. My pension still came in every month, right on time, or at least that's what I assumed. I stopped checking the notebook as often. My hands weren't as steady and my eyes got tired more quickly. Besides, Layla sounded so confident, so capable. "You raised me to be responsible," she said once, smiling. "Let me take care of you now." Those words settled into me like a warm blanket. I'd earned this, hadn't I? After years of scraped knees, late-night fevers, school meetings, and quiet sacrifices no one ever thanked me for, maybe this was the season where I could rest. But rest has a way of turning into dependency when you're not watching closely. The first thing I noticed was the fridge. It didn't happen all at once. One week, the milk ran out sooner than expected. Another week, I realized I'd been stretching the same loaf of bread for days. I started making soup more often, not because I craved it, but because it lasted. When I mentioned it, she laughed. "Mom, you hardly eat. You always say that." That was true. My appetite had faded over the years, but hunger has a different kind of voice. It speaks up when it needs to. The second thing was my medication. One afternoon, I opened the cabinet and stared at the organizer. 2 compartments were empty. I checked the calendar. It was too early for a refill. I called Layla. She didn't answer. I left a message, keeping my voice light. "Sweetheart, I think something's off with my prescription. Can you check?" She called back later, sounding rushed. "Oh yeah, I'll look into it tomorrow. Don't worry." Tomorrow came and went. So did the next day. By the third morning, my joints ached in a way that felt old and sharp, like rusted hinges. I sat on the edge of the bed, waiting for the pain to ease, telling myself I didn't want to bother her. She had enough on her plate. That's how it works, you see. You start protecting the people who are supposed to be protecting you. The real shift happened the day I asked her for cash. "I just want to have some on hand," I said, when she stopped by that afternoon. The kids were in the living room, loud and happy, arguing over a game. "You never know." She froze for half a second. Barely noticeable, but I saw it. "Why?" she asked, too quickly. I shrugged. "Just in case." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Mom, there's really no need. Everything's digital now." "I know," I said softly, "but I like having a little." She sighed, the way she used to when she was a teenager and thought I was being unreasonable. "I'll bring some next time, okay?" She never did. After that, I started paying closer attention, quietly, without accusation. I noticed how she'd changed the subject when I asked about my pension, how she'd talk over me, filling the space with updates about the kids, about work, about how exhausted she was. I noticed how she'd grown defensive if I asked for receipts. "You don't trust me?" she asked once, her voice sharp. The question landed like a slap. "Of course I do," I said immediately, too immediately. "I'm just old habits." She relaxed then, satisfied, and I hated myself for it. The doubt settled in slowly like dust, not enough to see clearly, but enough to feel gritty when I tried to breathe. One evening after she'd left, I pulled the old blue notebook from the drawer. I ran my fingers over the cover, then flipped to the last page I'd written on. The numbers didn't match. My pension deposit was smaller, not by much, just enough to make me question myself. Maybe there'd been a change. Maybe I'd misremembered. Maybe. I closed the notebook and slid it back into the drawer. I didn't want to know yet. Knowing would mean choosing what to do with the truth, and that scared me more than being hungry. The final clue came from somewhere unexpected. My neighbor, Mrs. Alvarez, caught me on the front steps one morning. She was holding her mail, squinting up at me. "Your daughter went on a trip, didn't she?" I asked. "Yes, I saw the pictures online. Such a beautiful place, somewhere tropical." My heart thudded. "When was this?" "Oh, last week, I think. She looked so happy." I smiled politely, my face stiff. "That's nice." Inside, something cracked. Layla hadn't mentioned any trip, not a word, and I knew deep down that there was only one place that money could have come from. That night, I lay awake listening to the clock tick, 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 tick. Time passing, something being taken. I didn't confront her, not yet. I waited. Because when you love someone, you don't rush to the truth. You let it walk towards you on its own, hoping, foolishly, that it will stop before it reaches your door. I waited 3 more weeks before I said anything. 3 weeks of quiet observation, of measuring rice more carefully, of turning the thermostat down and wrapping myself in an old cardigan my husband used to wear. It still smelled faintly of him. Soap and something metallic like old tools. Lila kept coming by, smiling, busy, distracted. She talked about the kids' school, about traffic, about how tired she was. She never talked about money unless I asked, and even then, only in broad, comforting phrases. "Everything's handled, Mom. You're fine. Don't worry so much." Those words became a wall between us. The day I decided to stop waiting was the day my electricity nearly got shut off. I found the notice taped to my door, flapping gently in the breeze like a flag of shame. Past due. Final warning. My hand shook as I peeled it off. I stood there longer than I should have, reading the same lines again and again, trying to understand how this could be happening when my pension was supposed to cover these things. I called Lila immediately. She didn't answer. I called again, straight to voicemail. I sat down on the front step, the paper crumpling in my grip. My chest felt tight, not from panic exactly, but from the slow realization that something I'd trusted was breaking. When she finally called back that evening, I didn't raise my voice. "Lila," I said, "there's a notice on my door." Silence on the other end. Too long. "What kind of notice?" she asked. "Electricity." She sighed. "Mom, I told you there was a mix-up. I'm handling it." "When?" I asked. "Soon." That word again. Soon. Always soon. "I need to see my statements," I said quietly. Her breath hitched. I heard it. "Why are you doing this?" "Because I'm scared. And because this is my money." Her tone hardened. "You're overreacting." That's when I knew, not because of what she said, but because of how fast she said it, how practiced it sounded. "I want to come by tomorrow. I want us to look at everything together." Another pause. Then, reluctantly, "Fine." She came the next afternoon without the kids. She sat at my kitchen table, tapping her nails against her phone, eyes darting around like she was late for something. I placed the blue notebook between us. "I want to understand," I said. She rolled her eyes. "Mom." "No," I interrupted, surprised by the steadiness of my own voice. "Please." She unlocked her phone, pulled up my bank app, turned the screen toward me. At first, it looked normal. Deposits, payments, lines of numbers that blurred together. Then I leaned closer. There were withdrawals I didn't recognize, transfers that went to an account I'd never seen. My throat went dry. "What's that?" She hesitated, just a fraction of a second. Enough. "That's expenses," she said. "Whose?" "Mine and yours," she replied defensively. "I told you I was struggling." I scrolled. My fingers felt numb. Hotels, flights, restaurants, names that didn't belong in my life. "I used my pension to go on a vacation," I said. It wasn't a question. Her face flushed. "I needed it." "For a vacation?" My voice cracked despite my effort. "It wasn't just a vacation," she snapped. "I was burnt out. I was drowning. You don't know what it's like raising kids alone." I stared at her, this woman I'd given birth to, this stranger sitting at my table. "And I do?" I asked softly. "You think I don't know what it's like to sacrifice?" She looked away. "How much?" I asked. She didn't answer. "How much did you take?" Finally, in a whisper, "Most of it." The word landed heavy between us. Most. I felt something give inside me, not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet collapse, like a shelf finally breaking after years of holding too much weight. What was I supposed to eat? How was I supposed to live? She stood abruptly. "I didn't think it would get this bad." But it did. She grabbed her purse. "I'll pay you back." "When?" "Soon." That word again. She left without looking back. I didn't cry, not then. I sat at the table long after she was gone, the blue notebook open in front of me. I thought of all the times I'd told myself not to worry, of all the moments I'd chosen love over caution. That night, I cleaned out my fridge. Not because I wanted to, but because I had to. I threw away what had spoiled, half a carton of milk, wilted greens, a piece of chicken I'd been saving. When I closed the door, the fridge hummed softly, mostly empty, a hollow sound. That's when I made a decision. If my daughter wanted to treat my life like a resource she could drain without consequence, then she was going to see exactly what she'd done. I didn't call her, I didn't yell, I didn't beg. I waited. And I made sure that when she came back, when she opened that fridge, the truth would finally scream loud enough for her to hear. I didn't do anything dramatic after Layla left that day. No phone calls to the family, no police reports, no tears that soaked into pillows. I washed the single cup in the sink, dried it carefully, and placed it upside down on the counter. Then I sat back at the table and listened to the clock. Tick, tick, tick. Grief doesn't always rush at you. Sometimes it moves like fog, slow, quiet, settling into every corner until you don't remember what clear air felt like. That night, I ate a bowl of plain rice with a little salt. I chewed slowly, telling myself I was fine. I'd survived worse than this. There were days, long ago, when my husband and I counted coins to buy bread. This was different, but the muscle memory of endurance was still there. The next morning, I called the pension office. My hands shook as I pressed the buttons on the phone, listening to the automated voice guide me through options. When a real person finally answered, I gave her my information and explained, as calmly as I could, that I believed my funds were being misused. She didn't sound surprised. "You're not the first," she said gently. "We can help you secure the account." Secure. The word felt heavy and light at the same time. By the end of the call, access was changed. New passwords, new permissions. My pension would come directly to me again. It wouldn't fix what was already gone, but it would stop the bleeding. I didn't tell Layla. Instead, I waited for her to notice. In the days that followed, I lived very simply. I bought a small bag of groceries with the little cash I had left, eggs, rice, a loaf of bread. I turned the heat down even more and wore socks to bed. I made soup from bones I'd saved in the freezer, simmering them until the kitchen smelled warm and familiar. There was a strange clarity in it, stripping life down to its basics. Layla called twice. I let it ring. She texted, "Mom, are you okay?" I stared at the message for a long time before replying, "I'm fine," which was true in a way. I was alive, I was breathing, and for the first time in weeks, I was in control of something again. A week later, she showed up unannounced. I heard her car before I saw her, the familiar rattle as she pulled into the driveway. My heart sped up, but my hand stayed steady. I was peeling a potato at the counter, the skin curling away in one long strip. She knocked twice, hard. I didn't rush. I finished what I was doing, rinsed the potato, then walked to the door. She looked frantic. Her hair was messy, her eyes darting. "Mom," she said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation, "why didn't my transfer go through?" I tilted my head slightly. "What transfer?" "The money," she snapped. "There's nothing there." I closed the door behind her, the click loud in the small hallway. "I secured my account," I said simply. Her face went pale. "You what?" "I took my pension back." She laughed, a sharp, disbelieving sound. "You can't just do that." "I can, and I did." She started pacing. "You don't understand. I needed that money." "And I needed to eat," I said quietly. She stopped, looked at me, really looked for the first time in a long while. Something flickered across her face then, not anger, not defensiveness, something closer to inconvenience. "You should have told me," she said. "I tried. You didn't listen." Her jaw tightened. "So what now?" I shrugged. "Now you live with what you took." She scoffed. "You're being dramatic." I didn't respond. I just walked back into the kitchen. She followed me, and that's when she headed for the fridge. "I'll just make the kids something," she muttered, already pulling the door open. The scream came a second later, raw, sharp, uncontrolled. She staggered back, one hand flying to her mouth. "Oh my God, Mom, what is this?" I stayed where I was, leaning against the counter. I didn't rush to comfort her. I didn't raise my voice. "That," I said, "is what happens when you take someone's future for a plane ticket." Her eyes filled with tears. "You never told me it was this bad." I met her gaze. "You never asked." The silence stretched between us, thick and uncomfortable. For the first time since this began, I saw something real in her expression. Not anger, not defensiveness, fear. She had opened that fridge expecting convenience, expecting to take, as she always had. Instead, she'd opened the door to consequences. Layla sank into the kitchen chair like her legs had given out. She stared at the fridge again, as if it might suddenly fill itself if she looked hard enough. One container of soup, half a loaf of bread wrapped in plastic, a small carton of eggs. Nothing else. "This isn't funny," she said, her voice trembling now. "I'm not joking," I replied. She pressed her palms to her eyes. "You should have told me you were struggling." I felt a slow burn in my chest. Not anger exactly, but something sharper. "I did," I said, "in a dozen small ways. You just didn't hear me." She shook her head, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I didn't think it would get this bad, I swear." I pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. For the first time since she walked in, I felt tired, bone-deep tired. "You didn't think at all," I said gently. "That was the problem." She looked up at me then, eyes red, mascara smudged. "I was overwhelmed. I needed a break. And I needed my dignity," I answered. The room went quiet again. The clock filled the space between us, faithful as ever. She reached for my hand. I didn't pull away, but I didn't squeeze back either. "I'll pay you back. I promise. I'll figure something out." I steadied her face, the familiar shape of her mouth, the crease between her brows she'd had since childhood. I wanted to believe her. God knows I did. But promises, I'd learned, are easy when you're cornered. "I'm not asking for money right now. I'm asking for honesty." She swallowed. "What do you want me to do?" I took a slow breath. "I want you to tell your brother." Her head snapped up. "No!" "Yes. He'll hate me. He deserves the truth, and so do I." She stood abruptly. "This is between us." "No," I said firmly. "This stopped being private when you took what kept me alive." Her shoulders slumped. For a moment, she looked small again, like the girl who used to cry when she broke something and didn't know how to fix it. "When?" she asked quietly. "Tonight," I said. "You'll call him. Here." She hesitated, then nodded. She pulled out her phone with shaking hands and dialed, put it on speaker. When my son answered, cheerful and unsuspecting, something twisted in my chest. "Hey, sis, what's up?" There was a long pause. "I need to tell you something," Layla said, her voice barely steady. I watched his smile fade as she spoke, watched confusion turn to disbelief, then to anger. His voice rose, sharp and protective. "You did what?" "I didn't mean to." "You took my mom's pension? Are you out of your mind?" I closed my eyes briefly. Hearing it out loud made it real in a new way. There was shouting, tears, excuses that fell apart under the weight of truth. When the call ended, the house felt different, heavier, but also cleaner, like a wound finally exposed to air. Layla wiped her face. "He's furious." "He's worried," I corrected. She looked at me, really looked this time. "Why didn't you stop me sooner?" I gave a small, sad smile. "Because I thought loving you meant trusting you." That night, she left quietly. No slammed doors, no angry words, just a long hug at the threshold, her arms trembling. "I'm sorry," she whispered into my shoulder. "I know," I said, and I meant it, but knowing wasn't the same as forgiving. The next day, my son came over. He brought groceries without saying a word, bags full of things I hadn't seen in weeks. Fresh fruit, meat, milk. He filled the fridge slowly, carefully, like he was afraid it might disappear again. "I should have noticed," he said finally, his voice thick. "I should have checked on you more." I reached for his hand. "You're here now." Word spread quietly through the family, not with gossip, but with concern. Calls came in, offers of help, apologies for assuming everything was fine. Layla stopped coming by for a while. I missed her. That was the hardest part to admit. But I didn't chase her. Some lessons need space to settle. Weeks passed. My pension stabilized. My fridge stayed full. The house felt warmer, not because the heat was higher, but because I no longer felt invisible. One afternoon, a small envelope arrived in the mail. Inside was a check. Not the full amount, but a start, along with a note written in Layla's handwriting. "I'm working extra hours. I'm cutting back. I know it doesn't fix everything, but I'm trying." I folded the note carefully and placed it in the blue notebook. Trying mattered, but trust, I knew now, had to be earned again, slowly, honestly, like filling an empty fridge one careful item at a time. The hardest part wasn't the money. It was learning how to sit with what had happened without letting it harden me. After my son stepped in, things changed in small but meaningful ways. He started calling every morning on his way to work, not to check on my finances, just to hear my voice. Sometimes we talked about nothing at all: the weather, a bird he saw on the highway, what he planned to cook for dinner. Those calls stitched something back together inside me. Layla stayed distant. She sent money when she could, short messages, no excuses, just updates. I respected that more than apologies. Words had been too easy for her before. The family gathered a month later for my grandson's birthday. I almost didn't go. Crowds felt dangerous when wounds were still healing. But my son insisted. "You shouldn't disappear because of this." So I went. The house was loud and warm, filled with balloons and the smell of frosting. Layla avoided my eyes at first. I didn't force anything. I hugged the children, laughed when the cake collapsed slightly in the middle. Life kept moving, imperfect, stubborn. At one point, I found myself alone in the kitchen refilling my tea. Layla came in quietly behind me. "Mom?" she said. I turned. She looked thinner, tired in a way that sleep doesn't fix. "I know saying sorry isn't enough," she said. "I know I broke something." I nodded. "You did." She swallowed. "I thought you were stronger than this. I didn't think you'd ever run out." That hurt more than I expected. "I am strong," I said calmly. "That's why I survived it." Her eyes filled. "I didn't see you as someone who could be hurt." That's the danger of love. It makes people think you're endless. She cried then, quietly, not for show. "I don't want to be that person," she whispered. "I don't want you to either," I said. We stood there for a long moment, the noise of the party muffled around us. No hugs, no dramatic reconciliation, just truth standing still between two women who shared blood and history and pain. That was enough for that day. Over time, things settled into a new shape. Not the old one, that was gone, but something sturdier. I kept control of my finances. My son helped me set up alerts, small beeps on my phone that told me when money came in or went out. At first it made me anxious, then it made me feel safe. I learned to ask for help without handing over my autonomy. Layla worked more. She changed, slowly. I watched her from a distance, letting her show me who she was becoming instead of who she said she was. One afternoon, months later, she came by again. This time she knocked softly. "I brought groceries," she said, holding up the bags like an offering. I stepped aside and let her in. She opened the fridge carefully this time, slowly. She placed things inside one by one: milk, vegetables, yogurt. She didn't scream. She exhaled. "It looks better," she said quietly. "So do you," I replied. She smiled, small, genuine. We sat at the table and shared soup, the same kind I'd made when things were at their worst, only now there was bread on the side, butter too. "I think about that fridge a lot," she admitted. "It scared me." "It was meant to," I said. She nodded. I deserved it. That night, after she left, I stood alone in the kitchen. I opened the fridge and looked inside. It wasn't full, but it wasn't empty either. Neither was I. I realized then that healing doesn't come from punishment. It comes from clarity, from seeing the cost of your actions without being shielded from them. I hadn't humiliated my daughter. I hadn't screamed or shamed her. I had simply let the truth speak for itself. And sometimes that's the loudest lesson of all. Healing didn't arrive all at once. It came in quiet, ordinary moments, the kind you almost miss if you're not paying attention. I noticed it the first time I went grocery shopping without calculating every item twice. I stood in the aisle, holding a small package of strawberries, debating whether they were worth it. Then I realized I didn't have to justify something so small anymore. I placed them in the cart and felt a surprising swell of emotion. Freedom, I learned, often looks like something simple. I began cooking again, not survival meals, but food that smelled like care. Onions softening in oil, garlic warming the air, bread toasted just enough to crackle when you pressed it. I set the table for myself even when I ate alone, a habit my husband used to insist on. Meals deserve respect, he'd say. So did I. Lila kept her distance, but she didn't disappear. She paid me back in pieces, not just money, effort. She asked before coming over. She listened more than she spoke. When she made promises, she followed through. One evening, she called me just to ask how to cook lentils. "I never paid attention when you did it," she admitted sheepishly. I smiled into the phone. "That's all right. We're paying attention now." We cooked together sometimes after that, side by side, not face to face. It felt safer that way. The rhythm of chopping and stirring filled the space where apologies used to sit. My son noticed the change, too. "You seem lighter," he said during one of our morning calls. "I feel steadier," I replied. "There's a difference." I stopped feeling ashamed of what had happened. That was important. Shame had crept in quietly at first, whispering that I should have known better, that I'd failed somehow as a mother. But the truth is, trust isn't stupidity, it's hope. And hope only becomes a mistake when it's punished instead of protected. At the next family gathering, someone brought up money, joking about how hard things were lately. Lila went quiet. I watched her take a breath. "I made mistakes," she said simply, "big ones, and I'm still fixing them." No excuses, no stories. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. That was the moment I knew we were going to be okay. Not perfect, not untouched, but honest. Later that night, after everyone left, I stood in the kitchen again. This room had seen everything: confusion, hunger, fear, reckoning. I opened the fridge. It was full enough now. Leftovers in neat containers, fresh vegetables, a carton of milk with tomorrow's date written on it in my handwriting. I rested my hand on the door and let myself feel it. The safety, the warmth, the quiet victory. I hadn't gotten revenge. I had reclaimed my life. And in doing so, I'd given my daughter the chance to reclaim her integrity. Some people think consequences have to be loud to matter, but I've learned the opposite. Sometimes the most powerful lesson is letting someone see exactly what their choices have taken, without embellishment, without cruelty, just truth. That truth changed both of us. We're at emotional closure now. There's a strange quiet that comes after everything settles. Not the kind of quiet that feels lonely, but the kind that lets you finally hear yourself think again. Some mornings I sit at my kitchen table before the sun comes up, the house still sleepy, the clock ticking softly like it always has. I wrap my hands around a warm mug and let the steam rise into my face, and I think about how close I came to disappearing without anyone noticing. Not dying, just fading. It's frightening how easy it is for that to happen when you spend your life being the strong one, the dependable one, the mother who doesn't complain, the woman who says, "I'm fine," even when she's not. I didn't lose my pension all at once. I lost myself slowly. a skipped meal here, a postponed prescription there, a quiet decision to make do instead of speak up. And the scariest part? Everyone around me thought I was doing just fine. That's why I'm telling this story. Not because my daughter took my money, not even because she broke my trust, but because so many of us, especially women, especially mothers, are taught that love means self-erasure. That if we're not sacrificing, we're being selfish. That if we ask for help, we're being ungrateful. That if we protect ourselves, we're being cruel. None of that is true. I still love my daughter deeply. That never changed. But love without limits nearly cost me my health, my security, and my voice. And I want you to hear this clearly, especially if you're listening with that familiar ache in your chest. You do not have to be emptied to be loving. You are not a bad mother for setting boundaries. You are not heartless for saying no. You are not weak for needing what you need. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and for your children is to stop rescuing them from the consequences of their choices, because consequences teach what words cannot. I didn't punish my daughter. I didn't plan revenge. I simply stopped hiding the truth. And that empty fridge, it told a story louder than I ever could. It told the story of neglect without shouting, of entitlement without accusation, of love taken for granted. And when she screamed, really screamed, it wasn't because she was afraid of hunger. It was because she was afraid of herself, of what she had become without realizing it. That moment changed her, but it changed me too. I stopped apologizing for existing. I stopped explaining my needs as if they were inconveniences. I stopped shrinking to make room for everyone else. And something unexpected happened when I did that. People didn't love me less. They respected me more. Even my daughter, especially my daughter. Our relationship now isn't built on guilt or obligation. It's built on awareness, on care that has to be chosen, not assumed. And that's a stronger foundation than anything we had before. So if you're listening to this and thinking, this sounds like my life, I've been carrying everyone, I'm tired and no one sees it, please hear me. You are allowed to be seen. You are allowed to protect what little peace you have. You are allowed to open your own fridge, literal or emotional, and ask yourself whether it's full enough to keep you alive. And if it's not, you are allowed to change something, even if it makes people uncomfortable, even if they don't understand right away, even if they accuse you of changing. Sometimes changing is the only way to survive. So I'll ask you, not as a storyteller, but as a woman who's lived this, if you were standing in my kitchen, if you were holding that empty fridge door, if you were choosing between silence and dignity, what would you have done? Would you have spoken sooner, or would you have waited like I did until the truth screamed for you? Tell me your thoughts in the comments. Your stories matter here. And if this story felt like it reached into a quiet place inside you, if it reminded you that you're not alone, I hope you'll stay, subscribe, listen to more stories, share your own, because healing doesn't always come from being heard by the people who hurt us. Sometimes it comes from finally hearing ourselves. Months passed, not quickly, not dramatically, just one ordinary day after another, stacked gently like plates in a cupboard. That's how real healing happens, I've learned, not with announcements, but with consistency. I settled into a rhythm again, morning tea by the window, a short walk when my knees allowed it, a notebook by the phone where I wrote down questions before doctor appointments so I wouldn't forget them, small acts of care I'd neglected when I believed my needs were optional. The fridge stayed full enough, not overflowing, just honest. And every time I opened it, I remembered. Not with bitterness, but with clarity. Lila and I found a new language between us, less explaining, more listening. She stopped assuming, I stopped rescuing. When she offered help, she asked first. When I needed space, I took it without apology. Once, she caught herself mid-sentence. "I was about to tell you what's best for you," she said, exhaling. "I'm trying not to do that anymore." I nodded. So am I. We smiled, the kind of smile that comes from effort, not ease. One afternoon, she brought the kids over unexpectedly. They ran into the house like a storm, shoes abandoned at the door, voices bouncing off the walls. I watched them from the kitchen, their energy filling spaces that had once felt hollow. My granddaughter opened the fridge. "Grandma," she said, peering inside, "you always have snacks." I laughed, a real laugh, surprised by how easily it came. "Yes," I said, "I do." Later, when the kids were outside, Lila stood by me at the sink. "I think about that day sometimes," she said quietly. "The fridge." I didn't turn around. "So do I." "I didn't see you as someone who could lose," she admitted. "I thought you were just there, always." I dried my hands slowly. "That's how people disappear," I said. "Not all at once, just quietly, when no one notices they're human." She nodded, eyes wet. "I notice now." That mattered, not because it erased the past, but because it changed the future. I also changed how I talked to other women in my life, friends, neighbors, even strangers at the clinic who complained about being tired. I stopped responding with, "Oh, I'm fine." Instead, I said things like, "It's been hard," or "I'm learning to ask for help," or simply, "I'm taking care of myself." You'd be surprised how often that opens a door. People lean in, they confess, they exhale. There's a hunger out there, not just for food or money, but for permission, permission to stop pretending. One day, Mrs. Alvarez from next door knocked on my door with a pie. Apple, still warm. "I heard what happened," she said gently. "Not the details, just that you went through something." I invited her in. We sat at the table and shared slices, the crust flaking onto our plates. "You know," she said after a moment, "my son handles my finances too." My fork paused midair. "Do you trust him?" I asked carefully. She hesitated. That was answer enough. We talked for a long time that afternoon about boundaries, about fear, about how easily love can slip into dependence if you're not careful. When she left, she hugged me tightly. "Thank you," she whispered. I didn't ask for what. I think in some quiet way my story had already started traveling, not loudly, not publicly, but through kitchen cables and small conversations where truths feel safer. That's how change spreads, not in speeches, in whispers. At night, when the house is dark and the clock keeps its steady watch, I sometimes think about the woman I was at the beginning of all this, the one who believed endurance was the same thing as love. I wish I could sit beside her at that table, take her hands, tell her what I know now. I'd say, "You're allowed to take up space. You're allowed to be fed, in every sense of the word. And you don't have to disappear for your children to thrive." I can't go back, but I can live forward with that knowledge. And if you're listening to this, wherever you are, whatever you're carrying, maybe you can too. Because life doesn't ask us to be endless. It asks us to be honest. Honest about what we give, honest about what we need, honest about when it's time to stop giving away pieces of ourselves we can't afford to lose. That empty fridge didn't just teach my daughter a lesson. It taught me one too. That survival is not selfish, and dignity, once reclaimed, tastes better than any meal ever could. There's a moment late at night when the house settles into itself. The pipes stop clicking, the wind quiets. Even the clock seems to soften its ticking, like it knows the day has been long enough. That's the moment I've come to cherish the most. I sit at the table sometimes, not because I need to, but because I can. A small lamp on, a clean mug beside me, the fridge humming gently in the background, steady and unremarkable. That sound used to frighten me. Now it comforts me because it means things are working the way they should. I don't think about the money much anymore. What was taken is gone, and what returned, slowly, imperfectly, did its job. It restored stability, yes, but more importantly, it restored my sense of worth. I am no longer a background figure in my own life. Layla and I still have difficult days. Healing doesn't erase memory. Sometimes she overcompensates, asks too many questions, worries too much. Sometimes I pull back when I should lean in. We are learning still. But there is honesty now, and honesty, I've learned, is louder than love without limits. One afternoon, long after the worst had passed, Layla said something that stayed with me. "I used to think you were unbreakable," she said, "like nothing could really touch you." I looked at her and replied, "I was breakable. I just never let myself show it." That's the danger, isn't it? When we hide our fragility, people stop seeing us as people. They see us as resources, as safety nets, as guarantees, as something that will always be there no matter how much is taken. But nothing and no one is endless, not even a mother's love, especially not a mother's body, time, or future. I wish someone had told me that earlier. I wish I'd learned it before hunger forced the lesson. But perhaps learning late is still learning. Now, when I open my fridge, I don't rush, I don't count, I don't brace myself. I take what I need and close the door with intention. I do the same with my life. I choose where my energy goes. I choose who gets access to me. I choose rest without guilt. And in doing so, I've discovered something unexpected. I didn't lose my family by setting boundaries. I strengthened it. My grandchildren know me now, not just as someone who gives, but as someone who laughs, rests, and says no when no is needed. They see me sit down. They see me eat first sometimes. That matters more than we realize, because children don't just learn from what we say, they learn from what we allow. If there's one thing I hope lives on beyond this story, it's this truth. You can love deeply without disappearing. You can give generously without starving. You can be kind without being consumed. And if you're listening to this while feeling tired in a way sleep doesn't fix, if you've been quiet for so long that your needs feel foreign, let me say this to you plainly and without apology. You matter now, not after everyone else is settled, not once you've given everything away. Now. Don't wait for an empty fridge. Don't wait for your body to beg. Don't wait for the scream, yours or someone else's, to wake you up. Choose yourself sooner. I didn't, and I survived anyway. But survival doesn't have to be the goal. Dignity can be. Peace can be. A life where your voice doesn't tremble when you ask for what's yours. That's what I have now. Not perfection, not wealth, just enough, and the wisdom to protect it. And that, I've learned, is more than enough.